Wednesday, January 15th, 7 p.m. Tickets at thefloridaforum.com.
Tad Delagal, James Poindexter, and Alexandra Underkoffler. Professional licensure defense, non-compete agreements, severance agreements, and public and private employment litigation. Information at protectingcareers.com or 633-5000. Delagal and Poindexter, PA.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Janine Herbst. For the first time in Israel's history, a sitting prime minister is testifying as a defendant in court. Benjamin Netanyahu has taken the witness stand to testify in his corruption trial for the first time after more than 4 years of court proceedings. NPR's Daniel Estrin reports from the Tel Aviv courthouse.
Other public servants in Israel and a former prime minister have resigned when charged with crimes. Netanyahu is the exception. He's charged with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust for allegedly advancing the business interests of media moguls and a Hollywood producer in exchange for cigars, champagne, and positive press coverage. In his opening testimony, he said the charges were, quote, an ocean of absurdity. He said he does not live a lavish life and works out of national, not personal interests to defend Israel. He said the momentous events in Syria, where Israel is bombing Syrian military targets, means his aides may need to pass him notes. They did, and the trial paused for a couple of minutes. Daniel Estrin, NPR News, the Tel Aviv courthouse.
Now that Syrian rebels overturned one of the oldest dictatorships in the world, the Assad regime, after more than a decade of brutal civil war, the rebels with Abu Muhammad al-Jawlani reportedly in charge are running the country. NPR's Jana Raff has more from Syria.
They're trying to secure the country. They've said they've issued an amnesty for all army soldiers. And they have reached out to reassure Syrians that everyone will be welcome in this new Syria. But we're already seeing that fraying in the northeast, for instance. Kurdish forces have been driven out of Manbij, one of the centers that they had control of, by the Arab-led opposition forces. And that is one of the big fears of Syrians, that even though Bashar al-Assad is gone, that doesn't mean things will be peaceful.
NPR's Jana Raff reporting. This as Israel continues launching hundreds of airstrikes in Syria, which the UN says have to stop. In Southern California, a wildfire buffeted by strong winds has burned some homes and is threatening numerous others in Malibu. Steve Futterman has more.
The fire here is burning out of control, and it's rapidly grown overnight. It was first reported a bit after 11 o'clock last night. 5 hours later, it had spread to more than 1,800 acres. The fire has been moving in all different directions as wind gusts up to 40 miles an hour come and go. The flames have approached Pepperdine University. Many students have left, including Fade Akinfe.
First, it was a power outage that happened, and I heard from my suitemates that there was a fire, so we look out, and it was like really red.
The fire has jumped some portions of Pacific Coast Highway, and the winds are expected to continue and even increase throughout the day. For NPR News, I'm Steve Futterman in Malibu, California.
And you're listening to NPR News from Washington.
And you're listening to WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. Good morning. I'm Stephen Ponson. It's 9:04. Jacksonville has a new airline with direct flights to and from Connecticut's Tweed New Haven Airport. Avelo Airlines announced the nonstop service yesterday at Jacksonville International Airport. The twice-weekly flights begin on February 14th. One-way fares start at $48. Travelers can make reservations at aveloair.com. Republicans are adding to their supermajority in the Florida House. Yesterday, Tampa area Representative Susan Valdez switched her party affiliation from Democrat to Republican. The move from Valdez comes after she lost a bid to become the chair of the Hillsborough County Democratic Executive Committee. In a statement, Valdez said she won't agree with her fellow Republicans on every issue, but she will be welcomed and treated with respect. Valdez was reelected last month, and this is her last term as a state representative. The move gives Republicans an 86-34 majority over Democrats in the state House. This afternoon in Jacksonville, it'll be partly sunny with highs in the upper 70s to low 80s. Today's going to be the warmest day of the week since a cold front is on its way. Overnight, we'll have mostly cloudy skies with temps in the mid-60s. Before the cooler temps get here, rain's going to move through the area, so you'll want to have the umbrella tomorrow. Showers are likely on the drive to work in the morning. During the day, showers will continue with some thunderstorms possible, and it will be windy as well. Temps will rise to the lower 70s in the late morning, then drop to the upper 50s to end the day tomorrow.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher is committed to helping clients stay on track to reach their financial goals and enjoy a comfortable retirement. FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
From a yacht party backlash to the arrival of the first major league sports franchise for women in city history, we catch up with Jacksonville's mayor on the month's headlines. She also takes your calls and questions. Later in the program, the fascinating true story of Willie Brown, who gave his city the gift of preservation. But first, it's time for our monthly Ask the Mayor segment. I'm joined, as I am every month, by Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. Hi, good morning, Miss Mayor.
Good morning, Ann. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. And as usual, she is here to take your calls and questions. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect at WJCT.org, tag us on Facebook or at FCC On Air on X. I actually want to start with something you did, I think, yesterday alongside the fire chief, which is going door to door in a neighborhood that was recently impacted by a fire. What were you guys doing?
Well, we've had about 3 or 4 of these things in just the past several days. And so it's that time of year where people leave a lot of things plugged in. They don't necessarily pay attention to a dry Christmas tree that may be, easily set afire. It's just a good time to remind people about their smoke detectors and about their carbon monoxide detectors and all those things that they need to have and pay attention to as we head into the colder months of the year. But during the holidays, I think so many people are just not focused on that stuff. And so you end up having a lot of issues, whether it's a space heater or whether it's a holiday tree or whatever it is. It becomes an issue. And we've just had recently we've had several deaths and we've had several firefighters injured. And so it's serious. We want to really draw attention to the fact that there are some very simple things you can do to make sure that you are fire safe.
And you were giving out smoke detectors and...
Well, no, we give out free smoke detectors to people that need them. If people call 630-CITY, we can provide free smoke detectors. What we were doing is we were handing out a kit, basically of resources that are available to people if they need them, and reminders of what they should be doing, changing those detectors batteries twice a year. Some people put them in until they start beeping like crazy. They don't think about them, but you need to really change them twice a year. Just the little things that people may not be thinking about, and that's really what it was about, just raising awareness. The neighborhood seemed to appreciate it. Interesting thing about that house that went up the other day that we were at yesterday. That was known as the Christmas house. I don't know if you remember that back years ago. And I spoke with the daughter of the gentleman who was very badly injured, and he was the one that for 30 years created this huge Christmas display out in front of the house, and we would go out and cover it. So it was a house that was familiar to me.
Yeah.
So you hate to see all that happen, and obviously causes so much grief for the families. But a couple of steps, and it might not be something that we don't know what caused that one, but a lot of times it's something pretty simple.
I want to get to local stuff, but I also, because you're so deeply enmeshed in the world of healthcare, both through your personal experiences and your foundation and fundraising, I just kind of wanted to get your take on this, the killing of this United Healthcare CEO and really just kind of the public reaction to the news of it.
Honestly, Ann, I'm so dismayed with the whole of the social media world these days. I really almost don't go on aside from to post things I need to post or to post my sunrise pictures or whatever. It is really amazing to me. I know there are a lot of people who are hurting because healthcare is expensive and a lot of people don't feel like they have what they need. But at the end of the day, to see people celebrate someone getting shot is shocking to me. And I guess nothing should really shock me anymore, but it's, and to see that sort of get accepted, that was really a tough one for me to see. I don't think obviously that is the way But it certainly does speak to people's frustrations, and I do get that. I do get that. People feel very separated from solutions, and that's why we focus so heavily on it here. But I'll tell you, boy, that was just a tough one to watch.
On a very local issue, zoning overlays. So you recently signed a bill into law that would make it tougher for the city council to override a zoning overlay, which is typically applied when a community wants certain restrictions. It's been overridden before, memorably just recently on the South Bank,
Yeah.
where they voted to allow this storage unit facility combined with an apartment complex when storage units were specifically prohibited by the overlay.
Right. Yeah. And I don't want to say that this legislation was specifically related to that. It really wasn't. We've talked about it for a while because it's just so easy to just take that vote and remove what the voters have said that they want, what the communities have said that they want. And so I liked the legislation that Matt Carlucci came up with. Joe Carlucci, his son, came up with a modification that would allow it to pass. So it's basically just the addition of one vote, but that does make it more difficult to override the will of people that have really put some time into thinking what they do and don't want in their communities.
And that, in this case, that would have reversed or prevented that storage facility, because that only passed by a single vote, 10-9.
It did, but I do think in that situation, unless I'm remembering the wrong way, I do think there were a lot of modifications made to that, which made it more palatable to people in that community. So I don't know that as many people were really against it by the time that it passed. And frankly, that's what you'd like to see if there are going to be those situations where you have a developer that will come and actually work with the community to give them what they want, maybe come up with something that's beneficial to both. But yeah, you're right. In its current form, you're right, that wouldn't have passed.
We're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan. It's our monthly Ask the Mayor segment, and we are taking your calls and questions. You can reach us at 904-549-2937 or email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. We have a call from Lydia Bell in Brentwood. Good morning, Lydia.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lydia.
Good morning. Yes. Good morning, Mayor Deegan and Ann. Two things were on your desk when you took office: the liquor store in Brentwood and the medical examiner to morgue and forensic lab. You stepped in as our leader and purchased the liquor store. You righted that wrong, but turn around and sanction and support the illegal building of a 300-body morgue. Why have you abandoned your constituents in Brentwood? You are our leader. Death does not belong in our neighborhood, and we have been totally fighting against this. We want a Brentwood Skill Center, not a Brentwood Kill Center. We're alive in Brentwood. How can you support us in stopping this morgue and bringing life, a skill center in place of that building?
Well, I will say, Lydia, that I can't say much about this because, as you know, there's a lawsuit against the city, and I'm not allowed to comment on issues that are under lawsuit. I will simply say to you that the liquor store was a much simpler path in terms of being able to purchase that and turn it into really what will be a wonderful resource for small businesses. But the medical examiner's office was much further down the road and a much more in-depth project. I can't really say much beyond that at this point until the lawsuit is resolved. But I think by my actions on a number of fronts that I have been somebody who has really listened very closely to that community and has done the very best I can to make sure we get more eyeballs and more resources to that community. So I am very sorry about the frustration over this, and we'll see where everything goes legally.
All right. We've got a call from Stanley on the north side. Good morning, Stanley. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning to everybody, especially the mayor here. And the mayor, I voted for you, and I support Ms. Bell, by the way. I'm calling by the African American Advisory Board.
Yeah.
I am disappointed by the people that who are spearheading the advisory board here, because it's not fair and balanced, and it's not concerned about the African American community. And plus, in closing, you have a bunch of nonprofit running the organization. I mean, running the board. my main concern is the fact that when it comes to subject matter experts that know about community development are not on the board. And I put in to be on the board. And I am the most civic engaged African American in this city. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the phone call. We got many applications for folks who wanted to be on that advisory board, and we had a fairly large group of folks that went through it and tried to cull it down to various different folks that we thought could represent different segments of the community. And I know that that's never going to be popular when somebody gets left off when they really wanted to be on the board, but that board will not stay static forever. There will be a point at which more people can serve. But I think the folks that are there really do have their heart in it and are excited about providing guidance to the mayor's office and to the council.
We got a call from someone who I don't believe wanted to join the conversation on air, but had a question, and I'm not sure if I understand it fully, but perhaps you do. He's wondering if the city plans on reducing the speed limit in the morning and afternoon during rush hour, and it doesn't indicate where he would be talking about.
Yeah, I don't know about that. If that is something that is in the works, it's not something that's crossed my desk at this point.
Okay. We also have a question from Scott. He emailed, please give us an update on the septic tank situation. It says there are houses on or near waterways that have pipes from the septic tanks emptying into the waterway. It says that's on the south side somewhere.
Well, I would certainly love to know where that is, what we have done, because obviously that is, one of my priorities was to move that faster, and I'm grateful to say that Vicki Cavey over at JEA shares my belief that we need to work as quickly as we can on that front, and we're moving as fast as we can. But those areas where there are actually issues along the water, where there are things that are being put into the water, we absolutely need to know that. So if this is not something we are aware of, please make sure that you call 630 City and make us aware of that, or you can even contact my office, and we'll make sure that gets passed along, because if there's something that's actually dumping wastewater into the river, we don't want that.
Sure. Although I guess septic's indirectly kind of, that's the reason to phase them out, right? Is that's a
it is
problem.
Absolutely. But obviously you have tiers of priority there, and the ones that are actually leaching into the river or into the into the estuaries, whatever it is, I mean that would be priority number one, and that's where we have focused heavily our attention. So if we may not be aware of that.
Yeah, sure. We've got a call from Ron in Beauclair. Good morning, Ron. Go ahead.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call.
Hi, Ron.
Mayor, I love your leadership.
Thank you.
Here's my issue that I've been dealing with for several years, and that's regarding what the St. John's Water Management District in 2004 suggested in terms of water restrictions. We have just invested a lot of money to bring water from Black Creek to Lake Brooklyn. In 2009, the city of Jacksonville enacted an ordinance that reinforced in terms of what the St. John's Water Management District suggested in terms of 2 days a week, except this time of year when it's 1 day a week. And in that ordinance are fines. So the first violation is a warning, the second is $50, the third is $250. I personally showed up at a city council meeting for public remarks. I spoke to the issue. I had a Melissa Long come up to me afterwards. She and I spoke. I've spoken with people at the St. John's Water Management District. But bottom line, it's kind of like going out there on Interstate 95. We can post speed limit signs, but if nobody's going to enforce them, then it becomes a moot issue. I don't see where anything has ever been enforced. I think it could be a revenue source for the city if we hired somebody part-time, go out between 6 and 9 in the morning and just go through neighborhoods, and you will see how many people are violating those water restrictions.
Ron, I'll check into that, because it is important. I mean, water is a precious resource for us, and those limits are there for a reason. And I'm sure that people have a million reasons why sometimes their water gets left on or is on at the wrong times. We recently had to reset our sprinklers because when we lost power, the sprinklers set to a different time. So we had to have somebody come out and show us how to reset our sprinklers because we're not very handy.
Right.
But did that, because we want to make sure that we we do the proper thing. But I agree with Ron. I mean, I think I don't know what those numbers are in terms of enforcement. I don't know how much money has been brought in from that, but I will certainly check. And I think I understand your frustration, and I think it makes a lot of sense to make sure that folks are. It also helps with awareness, because if you're not telling people all the time, they may forget, or you may get new people that don't know,
or may not know how to reset their sprinklers.
Yeah, or may not know how to reset their sprinklers.
Right. We have a call from Eric in Arlington. Good morning, Eric. Go ahead.
Good morning. Some of the fallout is already occurring from climate change, and it's coming in the form of insurance costs. My homeowner's insurance has been skyrocketing over the past, since DeSantis has been in office. It's now more than my actual mortgage payment, the insurance. And State Farm is about to drop me, and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. I don't know if this is a ploy to try to get my house or what, but these insurance parasites have been courted by Ron DeSantis. He won't even let people talk about, say the words climate change in any sort of government documents, any state government documents. Can anything be done locally about this terrible problem that's being completely ignored by the Republican Party? Thanks for taking my call.
Well, thanks for the call. I mean, obviously, when it comes to insurance issues, that's very largely a function of the state. But we do obviously locally take a very strong opinion and strong view about making sure that we have a resilient community and making sure that we are doing everything that we can to protect ourselves and our homes from climate change. One of the things is that 50-year resilient plan that we've come up with that will basically be a roadmap for how things are zoned, where things are built, to make sure that people aren't really in the path of what will be rising seas and protect what we have. So locally, we do very much have a strong focus on that. In terms of insurance rates, we don't have a lot of, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of control over that.
Yeah, I want to ask you too. I mean, the impact of storm damage, insurance rates, taxes, impacts of climate change is really starting to show up in some of parts of Florida in the housing market.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Ann, and this is a frustration for people I know in Northeast Florida. If you take a look at where 90% of those storms hit, it's not here. And yet I think folks here feel like their insurance rates have gone up in a way that would suggest that we have been hit a lot more than we have. So you can understand in communities that seem to be in the bullseye over and over again, where insurance companies might cost more to insure there. Here we haven't had that issue. So I feel like in high risk areas, you can see why they would be somewhat higher. But I think for Jacksonville, I can understand why people have some frustration there. We haven't been hit by a major hurricane here since Dora. You can't count Irma. You can't. I mean, and Matthew,
because it wasn't really a hurricane when it hit. It just came through.
Well, but we'll still see our rates go up some from that. But at the end of the day, no direct hit. If you look at the billions of dollars that some of these storms have cost in South Florida and on the Panhandle, we just haven't seen that type of damage here, thank God. But yet we still suffer from these very high insurance rates, and people are very frustrated about it. It's sort of, you dovetail that, with the affordable housing crisis, and people are extraordinarily frustrated by it, as you can hear.
I guess what I'm wondering though is if in fact there is this downturn in terms of home values because of all of these challenges that people are facing, does that present any kind of opportunity for the city, given the shortage of housing? I mean, how do you see the city responding to a market downturn if it happens in terms of tax revenues or just in terms of the availability of perhaps additional housing?
Well, look, we have to sort of brace every year for what's going to happen in Tallahassee in terms of how we can use those revenues and how much of that we can receive. But at the end of the day, that's why we have been so very focused. I think we're the first city that has taken general funds to support affordable housing. For the first city in Florida, I think that's done that. It's the first time I know in Jacksonville. But very few cities will take general revenue funds and put them into affordable housing. We've done that because we feel like it's necessary to increase. Bottom line is we have to increase the number of affordable housing units. We're 35,000. In underneath water with our affordable housing units. So we are working very hard to create a number of different paths to home ownership and to help alleviate some of these costs that people have in some of the pilot programs that we've had and the things that we're working on now in the city. But we're expecting 4,000 of those units to come online, very shortly. So we're working hard to try to create more inventory. So it's a matter of inventory. It's a matter of zoning, making sure that we create a zoning code that helps with better density. And we just have to keep giving people tools in any way that we can locally. But as I said, a lot of these things in terms of insurance rates are not under our
Local
control.
decisions, yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Jacksonville Mayor Donna Deegan as our part of our monthly Ask the Mayor segment, and we've got a call from Rick in downtown. Good morning, Rick. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. How are you? I voted for the mayor, and I'll vote for her again. My question is, around Jacksonville, there's a lot of construction. You got 95, you got 10. Is there a way that we can please, Mayor, keep Jacksonville updated when these projects will finally be completed, please? That's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Again, Rick, we do have a lot of construction, and a lot of it is really good stuff. In terms of the interstates, it's just another one of those things. I hate to say we can't control what DOT does, but we can't. So some of those things, we have to take what we get in terms of timing on those projects. And I know that there are some that are way overdue, but I think they're doing the best they can at this point.
Yeah, and Rick, I would direct you to our colleague here at WJCT. Dan Scanlon does a lot of transportation reporting. He almost always has the latest information. You can find his reporting on the Jacksonville Today website, and so it may have some information for you about I-10 and I-95. We're touching on the issue of housing, and so I do want to ask you about homeless enforcement now that that new law is taking effect. Yep. What can you tell us about where enforcement stands? How many people have been contacted or arrested?
Yeah, so our path team that is manned by the JFRD just started working on November the 23rd. That's the providing assistance to homelessness team that goes out along the streets to make people aware of food insecurity services, any sort of services, mental health services, other things that are, available to them in terms of substance abuse, places to find shelter, all those things. Those people have been out since the 23rd, 24/7. And so from what I understand, they have begun to mitigate some of the other, things that we've seen before that. The sheriff's office started to enforce October 1st because that's when the law went into effect. I want to remind people there is now a law in effect that was passed in Tallahassee that makes it illegal for anyone to sleep on the street. So we have to get people into these shelters and services that are available to them.
Because the city can be sued if it doesn't enforce that law?
Absolutely, we can be sued and will be sued if we do not enforce that law. So we also have a process through that path team of holding people's belongings. We're working on a place for pets. It's a process, right? If you recall, in my budget, I proposed $10 million to fund a lot of additional housing units for people to create partnerships to make that happen. A lot of different funding for wraparound services. That was reduced quite a bit by council, but we're working towards it. We've got $1 million for that JFRD initiative and $1.3 million for the shelters at this point. But what we know is that JSO, since October 1st, has, I think, warned 448 people, and we think we have about 500 at any given time that are on the streets. But that's a lot of people who have been warned. Since.
Are those individuals or the number of warnings, perhaps, that went to the same person more than once?
That I don't know. I know that these are the numbers they gave us: 448 warnings since October 1st. Number of arrests since November 1st, 52. And JFRD has had about 150 contacts since the PATH team went into action on November the 23rd.
And have you asked the sheriff to track those people who are arrested in terms of how long they're in jail or what that costs the city to house them for the period of their incarceration?
I'm sure we'll have those numbers. I don't think we have anything yet, but I'm sure we'll have those numbers. I will also tell you that one of the things that JFRD is finding is that a lot of people they are contacting that are on the streets are not from here. And so we have a homeward bound program where, for instance, there was one woman who, through her driver's license, we found that she was from Vero Beach. She has family in Vero Beach. And we were able to get her back there where her family is. And that's part of the process as well, this homeward bound program of getting people back to where their own communities are. Why they ended up in Jacksonville or how, I don't know, but that's part of the whole plan, is to get them back where they came from.
Yeah, I mean, I would venture to say that there's some people in the homeless advocacy community that maybe don't think that sending people away with bus tickets is any kind of solution to homelessness.
There is a lot of this that I don't particularly love, Ann, but this is where we are. We have a law that we have to comply with, and what we are trying to do is move as quickly as we can toward a process that would allow us to get people the wraparound services they need, have the shelter they need while they're getting these services, and then step them into a situation where they can become positive, contributing members of Jacksonville. That's what we want. We want these people to have successful lives. Many of them have additional issues that have to be addressed. The cities that have been most successful with this are cities that have found a way to 24/7 have these intake situations where people can get the services they need. In terms of sending people into the communities where they come from, I know that's probably not the most popular thing, but look, at the end of the day, you have so many resources for the citizens of your city, and if people are either being bused here or somehow are here and they'd rather go home to be closer to family, I think that's just one resource we have. I don't know that it's the largest resource.
I'll be interested in our future discussions to talk a little bit about, what those costs are,
Yeah.
and whether that is shaping people's feelings about that law. I want to talk about Laura Street Trio briefly because that is a project that appears back on, off, but at this point there are active negotiations. You met last Monday with the new developer's lawyer.
Yep.
And
we met with them. We met with we met with Paul Bertozzi and his lawyers. And frankly, both parties have come to terms on the lien waiver agreement. So what we're doing right now is we're waiting for Live Oak, and that is Paul's entity. We're waiting on Live Oak to tell us that we can move forward. That is because there's also another process that has to take place, and there has to be, what we did is we tried to put several dates in place, that this has to happen by this date and this has to happen by this date, and that's how we can hold off that lien. But at the end of the day, we have to wait until he tells us it's okay to move forward, and that means the purchase agreement has to be done.
And we should say that one of the directives in that would be to at least start some construction by the end of next year.
Right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And what we're hoping is to what we have initially discussed is landing on the end of this year for having an agreement in place, a sales agreement in place, and that's the thing that we're waiting to see, where exactly that is.
Just a half a minute left here, but we have a question from Martha on Facebook asking about the village of Mayport. Does it have a mayor? I've always loved the area. Is there a plan to develop, or how is it managed?
I mean, Mayport is in Atlantic Beach, so it is part of Atlantic Beach, and it's managed by the Atlantic Beach mayor.
Yeah, and it is
Curtis
a
Ford.
neat historic community.
It is, absolutely.
Really. All right, well, Mayor Donna Deegan, I know you've got other things to do this morning. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Up next, or traveled north of the Georgia state line, but when he died alone in his cabin, he gave the city one of its greatest gifts, hundreds of acres of pristine wilderness. Here to tell us about it is Tim Gilmore, author of The Wilderness and Willie Brown. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks, Ann.
So this is a fascinating history, both of Willie Brown himself as a person, but also the place and the time that he inhabited. And his life story is just really extraordinary.
It is, as you said. He never had a phone, never had electricity, never had running water.
This was a man who died in 1970. It's not like he was,
right, yeah, not like he lived in he was born in the 1800s actually, but yeah, died in 1970. Gave hundreds of acres to the Nature Conservancy. He had this kind of feeling that the land that he lived on was like he had this kind of certain responsibility to take care of it and to pass it on, that he was part of it, but also that it was something that people needed, a not just a place, but this particular place. There's a kind of magical quality to it.
And this is, for people who aren't familiar, this is the Theodore Roosevelt area of the Timucuan Preserve.
Exactly.
In
Yep.
kind of North Jacksonville. And his land is on
It-
what was
it's-
actually St. John's Bluff, the bluff.
Yeah, it's right off of Fort Caroline Road and close to Fort Caroline. And as you said, the Theodore Roosevelt area. He loved Theodore Roosevelt because of the conservation thing. So it's lots of thousands of people hike these trails every year. One of them is the Willie Brown Trail. Some people think of all of the trails as the Willie Brown Trails. Some people, whom I know, go out and have coffee at dawn with Willie Brown sometimes. Still, 54 years, almost 55 years later, people still have a real connection to him, and they did when he was alive, certainly. And I kind of love the irony of that. At the earlier, you referred to him as a hermit. I have to tell you, I took some backlash for calling him a hermit early on when I was doing some research. People are not weirdly, but people are very defensive of Willie Brown. And I had people tell me, people who remembered him or people whose parents knew him, that, hermit, the word hermit has certain connotations, and that actually Willie Brown loved people and people came out to see him all the time. And this place was more remote then, much more remote then than it is now. And it wasn't necessarily easy to get to, but people knew where his cabin was. People came out to see him. People brought him food. People brought him wedding cake. There's one story of people who left a wedding reception with several of their friends to drive across town, go out to Willie Brown's cabin at night
and deliver this.
And bring them some wedding cake.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, so maybe people don't like the term hermit, but to be clear, he did
Yes.
live in this cabin, very isolated,
Mhm.
no trespassing signs around it to
Right.
keep hunters away.
Correct.
Yep.
Yep.
And it was a very humble
Mhm.
abode, I guess you
Mhm.
could say. It had a single light, no running water.
Absolutely. Yeah. Look, when when he was alive and when he died, the word hermit was in lots of headlines. I mean, lots of people would call him a hermit, but I do think it's particularly interesting that a lot of people, more than half a century later, took exception.
He's a
and-
very sociable hermit.
I guess so. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about his childhood because it's very shocking, some of it. He has lived on this property, or he lived on this land since he was 6 months old. It was always very remote, but much more so then than it is today. And he basically was, is it fair to say that he was sort of abandoned with his brother on this property when he was 12 years old?
So I'm really interested in how mythologies develop and trying to track the actual histories that connect or sometimes don't connect with those mythologies. And really kind of into, so he's born in the late 1800s, and really into the 1950s this kind of mythos started developing around him. He didn't foster it or anything, but it just kind of naturally started happening. There are inconsistencies in, the actual records about when he was living there and how, but his parents came down from New York. His father was a lawyer in New York, and they came to Jacksonville, and kind of the official-ish story is that they looked for a place out of town during some of the yellow fever epidemics that were happening. And so
And they lost a couple children to that.
they did, yeah. Daughters, one of whom, nobody really knows her name or where she is or anything. Still,
Where she's buried.
yeah, yeah, right, yeah, where she's buried, right. So the mythos is that he lived on this land since he was an infant. That he and his brother Saxon was his brother's name. Took care of the land on their own, and Saxon died in the 1950s, and then it was Willie's responsibility to take care of the land and pass it on to the people.
But in your reporting, which is extensive for this book, we should say, I mean, it involves all kinds of interviews that you did, archival records, letters, but the family, the parents, after losing these two daughters to yellow fever, basically moved back to Jacksonville and lived in a kind of lavish downtown hotel while the boys remained there in this cabin.
They did stay downtown more. They were in a hotel for a small period of time, but they did stay downtown more and leave the boys out. And it's actually hard to tell. And I actually had a lot of fun trying to track what actually was happening with what kind of structure they lived in. There was a large house that was there before them. There was a fire at some point. They rebuilt part of the house. They built a big barn. They lived in part of the barn. And finally, after both of the parents died, Willie and Saxon built this one-room cabin. And when Saxon died, Willie Brown stayed on in that one-room cabin, and that became, the place that people associated with him.
Now, it's pretty clear to know what would have happened to this property had it not been preserved, because
Right.
literally all you have to do is walk or drive, a few short blocks really away, and you're just in the heart of Arlington.
Yeah, this would have been prime real estate, absolutely. And it really is, what I love about the Theodore Roosevelt area. I mean, there's a lot that I love, but I love the fact that it is both representative of, the natural systems here, but it's also unique at the same time, both of those things. There are several ecosystems in the area there. There are hardwood hammocks, there's marshes, there's these high bluffs, and there are extensive shell middens that were left by the Timucuans thousands of years ago that run throughout the area. It actually has really fascinating history outside of Willie Brown's even being there.
Sure, because it has thousands of years of indigenous history that predated anybody
It
with
does.
the last name Brown.
Yeah, that's right. And there were a number of archaeological excavations during his lifetime. He would let archaeologists from the University of Florida come in, and he would participate in the digs and everything. He had a real understanding that wilderness, we think of wilderness as being like virgin land or something, but that wilderness is really rarely untouched,
Mm.
So also ironies. People think of Willie Brown the way they think of, Henry David Thoreau or something like that, on Walden Pond. He wasn't, his place was not pristine. He had some streetcars out there that he actually were full of books. He had lots of junk around. He wasn't a neat guy. There are some really interesting letters early on when his father is in the city, and he's writing to Willie in particular. And he says things like, get the place cleaned up. Your mother's going to be coming to stay. There's one letter in particular that says, your mother's coming, get rid of the rats. And so
That's good advice for any boy out there.
I suppose so. Yeah.
If you're just joining us, we're talking to Tim Gilmore. He is the author of 25 some books. His newest is called The Wilderness and Willie Brown. It's about a local resident who bequeathed his land to the Nature Conservancy in 1970. We have a question from Susan on Facebook. She says, can the land ever be developed, or is it protected forever?
It is protected forever, hopefully. I mean, the question is forever? I mean, right when I was finishing up the research for this book, we saw this possibility of developing some of the preserved parklands in Florida, for golf courses. And that was something that was floated, and thankfully quickly shot down. It is protected. It is, run by the Park Service. But I don't think we can take anything for granted.
Yeah. He didn't either. I mean, there's a great quote from him where he said that there will come a day when there will be nothing but a concrete jungle from New York City to Jacksonville. And sadly, a lot of that is true. But let's talk about this book. You're doing a reading coming up of the book. Tell us what that event is going to entail.
Absolutely. So I'm so thankful to Old Arlington Incorporated for hosting this. It is Thursday. Doors open at 6. It's at the Unitarian Universalist Church on Arlington Expressway, which I just have to real quickly say is a masterpiece architecturally by Robert Broward, and a really fitting place to have something like this celebrating Willie Brown. I'll have a presentation. I'll read a little bit. I'll tell some people some interesting things about Willie Brown, and sell some books. And I think it will be a wonderful night.
And you've got some great photos of Willie Brown. We've been showing some of them here as we've been talking. But he is an extraordinary looking guy.
Oh yeah, he was always
pencil thin, kind
That's
of
right.
1,000 feet tall. How tall was he?
Yeah.
I mean, you're pretty tall.
Yeah. Well, not as tall as he looked because he was so thin, but he really had this philosophy, if you can call it a philosophy, but of simplicity, of not taking more than you needed.
Or perhaps showers.
That could be, yeah. But when he left his land of the Nature Conservancy, and then died the year after that, in 1970, it also met this historic moment where young people were very interested in the environment, and Earth Day was a new thing, and he really he received letters from all over the place thanking him for this, and became this kind of surprising hero.
Well, it is a fascinating book. Tim Gilmore, we love talking to you about all your projects. Thanks so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
Yep. And up next, the symphonic sounds of the season, past and future.
Life South Community Blood Centers, providing blood and patient services to the local hospitals, serving patients in this community. Donating blood with Life South helps save lives. More at lifesouth.org to find a blood drive near you.
Hi, I'm Catherine Marr, CEO of NPR, where we're guided by a bold mission to create a more informed public. Join us today by giving to this station.
Call 353-9528 or visit us at wjct.org/radio.
On the next Fresh Air, Danielle Deadweiler. She stars in the new Netflix film adaptation of August Wilson's play, The Piano Lesson. She'll talk about what it was like to work with Denzel Washington and his family to bring it to the screen. She played Emmett Till's mother in the film Till and was in Station 11. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Musa Al-Gharbi says social justice movements now value performance over actual progress.
Transforming how we pursue social justice, pushing us in some ways towards these symbolic things that don't cost us anything, that don't require us to change or sacrifice anything, but that can give us a sense of progress.
Which is why he claims the so-called woke elite have never really been woke. That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11 on WJCT News 89.9.
2024 was a banner year for elections.
Citizens in more than 75 countries headed to the ballot box. Not all of these elections were free and fair, but outcomes in many were a surprise, including India, the U.S., Indonesia, and France. What this year meant for democracy, the billions who voted, and who now holds power. That's next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, it's the holiday season at the Jacksonville Symphony, but it is also a season for reflecting on the past year and planning for the next. So here to discuss both is Jacksonville Symphony Music Director Courtney Lewis. Good morning, Courtney.
Good morning. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you as well. So this was the 75th anniversary year of the symphony. How do you think it went?
Well, we're right in the middle of it right now. We just began in September, and we've been celebrating the history of our great orchestra with a season quite unlike any other. We've really up the ante, and to use a musical metaphor, pulled out all the stops with our guest artists and our programming this year. And we've seen a tremendous success with wonderful ticket sales and a real sense of achievement of the orchestra having been around this long and working at the caliber that it does. It's very exciting and rewarding. And for me also, as my 10th season, it's a bit of an anniversary as well. And I'm able to look back on a decade of really satisfying work of bringing the orchestra to more diverse audiences in Jacksonville and a greater number of people of our city.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I guess I should realize that you don't adhere to a calendar year. So your season kicked off basically in September.
Yeah, we're like school years.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you started with this magnificent Mahler symphony that you presented.
We did the Second Symphony, Resurrection, as a opening celebration with wonderful soloists. This is the piece that was on the movie about Leonard Bernstein that you might have seen.
Yes, yes.
And that same mezzo-soprano, Isabel Leonard, who sang in that movie, was one of our soloists, along with Eileen Perez, the wonderful soprano. So yeah, we kicked off with that. And then it's been a great year in terms of many new commissions for the symphony. One of the things that we believe in very strongly is that the art form has to be alive, and that we have to commission composers of today, of all sorts of different backgrounds, so that there's a variety of music, so that audiences can come and see people who look and sound like them on stage and hear that music. And I'm particularly looking forward to closing our season with a piece by the great African-American composer Carlos Simon entitled Zodiac, which he's written especially for us. So that score is arriving in a few weeks, and very much looking forward to that at the end of the year.
And that's the world premiere, right, in
Yes.
June 6th and 7th of
Mhm.
this. But you're also having a premiere by Conrad Tao, who's a pianist, an
right.
extraordinary pianist, who's been on this program with you before.
Yes.
And
He's
that's
our-
in April?
That's in April, that's right. He's our artist in residence this year. And as well as performing with the symphony several times as a soloist, he's also writing us a brand new piano concerto himself, which will premiere on April 4th and 5th with The Rite of Spring by Stravinsky, one of the most controversial and famous pieces of the 20th century. So really can't wait for that. Literally can't wait for it, because it's in April and I haven't got the score yet. So we're pushing hard for that that should be in the mailbox pretty soon.
Yeah, there's a little pressure there, I
Yep.
guess, to get that underway. And there's also a great performance when you were talking about getting other voices in and other, there's kind of a push to try to get some women composers more
Mhm.
involved. And there was a world premiere this fall with Brittany Green.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she wrote a piece called Testify, which was a reflection on her youth in Baptist gospel churches and her mother who played the tambourine. And it was a piece based on tambourine solos and gospel music, but seen through a kind of Western classical lens that she grew up with. So that was wonderful. It was a really exciting opening to the concert. And there's something very special about having the composer in the hall the first time a piece is ever heard. I mean, at the first rehearsal of that piece, that was literally the first time that those sounds had been heard in history in that piece. And that's something that's very exciting to be part of. And then to be able to go and say, what do you think? Because you can't call Beethoven up and say, what do you think of our performance? So it's really nice to be able to have her sitting there and be able to give feedback in real time.
Oh, fascinating. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought of that. You, of course, are smack dab in the middle of your busiest season,
Mhm.
right? The
Yep.
holiday season. And there's all kinds of things this is a point where a lot of people touch the symphony for
Mhm.
the first or only time sometimes in a year.
Yeah.
Because it really is a community engagement.
Yes. So two of our biggest concerts are on at the moment. First of all, the First Coast Nutcracker, which is the only nutcracker in town that contains a live orchestra, is on at the moment. So you can still get tickets for that. And also this weekend, Handel's Messiah, one of the people's favorite things to listen to at Christmas, the great story of the birth and passion of Christ as told by Handel in the 18th century. So those two programs are on right now, and some tickets are still available.
Yeah, and people really do love those. So, in addition to some of the performances, you've also been celebrating some like upgrades that are coming to the actual facility at Jacoby Hall. So, what tell us about that a little bit?
Well, the hall is now 25 years old, and it's a fantastic acoustical space. One of the reasons why I wanted to come and work here was that one of the few orchestras in the country, the only one in Florida, that has its own concert hall where all the offices are, all the rehearsals are. And that means as a conductor that you can really work on the style and sound of the orchestra because you're in the space where the concerts take place for every rehearsal. So we're very lucky to have such a great space. But like any building, it needs some work. It needs new seats, it needs better patron access, that kind of thing. So a lot of that is part of what we're working for at the moment.
Yeah, and so that is possibly going to be enabled by some donations. What inspires the orchestra's long-term plans? I mean, beyond just this season and the goals and the schedule.
Well, one of the very important things for orchestras today is having a plan for sustainability. Orchestras are expensive. When you put on a exhibition at an art museum, for example, it just sits there for a couple of weeks. They're inanimate objects, and people come and see it, and in comes the money. But every concert requires 80 people who are all paid with staff, and they're all the best, the top of their field. And it needs those people to make the music speak every time. So it's an expensive art form. But we're extremely lucky in Jacksonville. And one of the reasons why I'm still here is that the community is so supportive. And we just, you might have noticed, had a $5 million gift from the Preston Haskell Foundation.
Yeah.
Those kind of things ensure that the Jacksonville Symphony will be around for the next 75 years. And that's wonderful to see.
Well, Courtney Lewis, we love talking to you. Thanks so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
And that's our program. Thank you for listening. If you have feedback or suggestions, you can send either to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. If you missed anything, you can catch our rebroadcast at 8 o'clock tonight or find our entire archive on your favorite podcast platform. Join us tomorrow. We're talking Super League enthusiasm for the city's first pro sports franchise for women. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com. The Cummer Museum of Art and Gardens in Jacksonville. Curated art from ancient times to the present. Explore galleries, enjoy refreshments and entrees at the cafe, and treasures in the museum shop. More at cummermuseum.org.
Vickers Landing offers elegant retirement living in the heart of Ponte Vedra Beach. Our Sawgrass and Oak Ridge campuses feature amenities galore, resort lifestyle, comprehensive security, and plans for every stage of aging. Retirement redefined. VickersLanding.com.